my niece, who's now 11, and I love her dearly. She's like my mini me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how am I gonna face this to her. And so I remember calling my mom up and like, hey, I'm at Holiday Market and I'm buying up lunch, dinner, everything, because I went there and bought cupcakes, everything, you name it, I bought it. And I'm like, meet me at my house. And she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, nothing's wrong. And so she got to the house and she looked into my eyes and she's like, what's going on? I'm like, nothing, everything is fine. And we sat down. I'm like, I have to tell you something. And she was like, what is it? And I said, went to the doctor today and they said I have stage 2 breast cancer. And she just looked at me like, what did you say? And I'm like, yeah, I have stage 2 breast cancer. That's what they told me. And she immediately got up and started walking the room praying. And then, meantime, this is the funny part. She was like, oh, I thought you were going to say that you're pregnant. And I'm like, what? Like, Mom, no. And so I had to break the news to my dad, which was even more difficult because my grandmother passed away from breast cancer. And I was really close to my grandmother too. So I had to FaceTime my dad because he's in California. And I'm like, hey, Dad. And he's like, hey, what's going on? It's the middle of the day and you calling me. And I'm like, I have some news for you. And he was like, what? I'm like, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. And he just looked and then he went on a rant a little bit because, you know, he's vegan. So he's like, oh, you need to stop eating meat, da da da. And then next thing you know, he broke down crying. And I never saw my dad cry before. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And so I called each and every one of my friends and family members to tell them what was going on. And immediately everyone started praying. And even if you weren't a Christian, they were praying. And to me, it brought everybody together in their faith together to help me, you know. So I was actually helping them in a sense and bringing them closer to God. And it was a lot. And then my niece, I didn't tell my niece because I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. It was really hard. But she found out because I kept going back and forth to the hospital because during my port surgery, my lung collapsed 3 times where it went down to 40%. And I didn't have any chest pains. I didn't have shortness of breath. They found it through x-ray. And so they had a chest tube in me immediately. And then they ended up having to do a lung procedure to expand my lung and everything. And then I was fine, so I thought. And I started my first round of chemo and I was really tired. And so my niece is like, why Auntie Juju? And that they call me Juju in my family. Why she's going back and forth to the hospital? Why is she so tired? What is going on? And everybody's like, oh, she's fine. And she's like, well, she's the healthy one. Like, what is she doing in this space? And my sister finally told her because she was just like, no, she wasn't giving up. And when she told her, she was so sad because my niece is the type of niece that will Google everything and research. And her teacher at the time at school was fighting breast cancer, and she saw how her teacher was deteriorating. So it was like, you know, I didn't want her to think that of me. So I remember she text messaged me, and I still have the text where she's like, Juju, why you still have, you know, breast cancer? I don't understand. But you know what? Even if you lose your hair, you're still beautiful. And hair is an accessory that you really don't need. And so I'm like, that is so true, and that is so profound. And she's been by my side even more so than we were. And I just love her. Absolutely love her and adore her. But that was like the toughest person to tell that to. I was worried about her than anybody else.
Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine.